Very special thanks to Philip Raby Specialist Cars for providing, of course, the Jaguar in this review, and obviously if you want to check out their current stock, or check out other vehicles which they've previously sold, and the servicing program which they do as well, in particular for Porsches, but with other specialty vehicles here as well, such as this one, then click the link right below this video in the description, and you can find all of their details there. I know that for a lot of you, your first experience or first taste of this series, Beards and Cars, was actually about Jag XKs. A lot of you came to the channel to specifically hear about the Jag XK, either in its base model or R forms. And for me, it's been quite the roller coaster as well, going from driving one and loving it so much that I went out and bought my own, to then modifying my own, and finally moving on because I needed the extra space to the car which I have now. Then driving variations which I never actually purchased, and having interesting little hot takes here and there as to how I personally rank them in terms of being the most fulfilling versions of what the XK can do. In fact, most recently, my biggest hot take was probably that I like the base model 5 litre more than the XKR, which I'm sure many R owners would completely disagree with. But here's the key thing. This is one of those occasions, and even I was guilty of this, where you could think, okay, I already think I know what to expect from the XKR-S. It's got a shoutier paint job, a more wacky, in-your-face body kit with the bigger wing and the chin splitter. It's clearly aiming to be more of a Superleggera, a Scuderia, a GT3 RS level machine, something to truly worry mainland Europe. But at the same time, you're working with an elegant, comfortable, refined GT car, so much like a Bentley Continental. Surely there's only so far you can really take that. Can you really ever worry something like a 911 Turbo in a car which is essentially too civilized to ever really do that? This could just feel like an XK with more power, and is that really necessary? Well, actually, yes. And my hot take for this episode is that I like this one more than the XKR with that 5 litre engine. Now that might not sound like a crazy hot take because this is, after all, the next step up that tree, so it seems like a fairly obvious thing to say, but the reason why I like it more is actually not because it takes the same thing and does it even better. It's because, to me, this car simply knows what it wants to be more than the XKR does. The fundamental difference between the 5 litre XKR and the 4.2 XKR, which I had, is simply that the 5 litre is faster and more powerful. Beyond that, there is honestly, to my taste at least, no other significant advantage. They already sound good, they already look good, it's no more comfortable, no more refined, no more efficient, it just has more power, more torque and more performance. So if that's the route you're going to go down, why not go all the way? Why not get the car that has even more power than that and balls out performance such as this one has? This, honestly, as a former XKR owner, and as somebody who's driven most of the variations of the XK from both generations at this point, in fact technically 3 generations, I would say that this is easily the closest of any of them to feeling like a true, genuine supercar. Because it's not just about the performance, it's about everything. This car has a different air to it. And it's kind of like the way that I like to describe Maseratis and Aston Martins. Are Maseratis or Astons the fastest option, or the most affordable, or the easiest to live with, or the best in any particular way? 9 times out of 10, no. And interestingly, they're not even trying to be. You just have that certain air about it. When you're in an Aston, it just hits different. When you're in a Maserati, it just feels different. It's almost like 2 very attractive people walking into a room, but one is reserved and quiet and the other naturally draws all attention because of some inexplicable thing about them. A confidence, a certain class. To me, this just feels more like a supercar than any other XKR does. Now technically this isn't the top of the tree. Of course the XKR-S GT is even more powerful and hyper rare, with only 45 being built in that very distinguishable look, the white with the stripes, the canards on the front bumper, the bigger carbon rear wing, about 570 horsepower, and doubtless that one feels absolutely nuts. To me though, I've always thought that that car pushes it a little too far. That is a little bit too boy racer for my taste. I'm aware that any owner would probably thoroughly disagree with that, but anyway, that's just coming from my point of view. This one to me is right on the cusp. It's very loud, it's much more shouty and in your face, and it has a clear change in direction from not trying to be as civilized anymore and just focusing on the performance, and I believe it's all the better for it. This has the look and the sound that already make the XK and the XKR such a beautiful machine, but it has that extra layer of almost a indescribable air to it that to me makes it look and feel even more like a supercar. The XKR that I owned, as beautiful as it was, is not the kind of car I would expect to see going up the hill at Goodwood. This, on the other hand, is. This is a Jag XKR which would fit right in the supercar paddock. That is simply a cut above the other XKs, and to me that's kind of an unarguable fact. Now in terms of performance, of course it's quicker. But it's not just quicker, it's significantly quicker. The speed is higher, 186 miles an hour. The 0 to 60 is down to 4.2 seconds. So this, in other words, is the first XKR which actually can genuinely worry Porsches, Lambos and Ferraris, because it moves away a little bit from the refined GT and allows itself to be a bit more of an animal. Now curiously, even the GT, the higher model than this, and this one, retain those two rear seats, which is kind of odd to me. If there was ever a car that was justified in removing them and putting a roll cage in, you'd kind of think it was these, but they chose to keep them in, and that's kind of cool, because to have a car that's this hardcore, with technically 4 seats, as tiny as the rear ones are, it's cool to be able to boast about anyway. Of course it still has much of the same practicality as a normal XKR, the trunk space, the fuel economy even isn't that bad for a car with 540 horsepower, and to me it manages to run the line so well between being too over the top and too in your face, but just right. Just enough power, just enough performance, just enough of a wacky, crazy, hardcore look to it, where it doesn't ruin the civility. It doesn't ruin the sleek, classy look. It does of course beg the question though, that with all of these notable differences in terms of how it feels, and trust me, as somebody who's driven plenty of XKs at this point, it does feel different, more than just being quicker in a straight line. Is it really justified in having that price hike? Because even if you can find one of these for sale, at the time of making this video there's like 2 of them on Auto Trader. One is the one that's here for sale at Philip Raby, and the other one is about £55,000 with even lower mileage. Is it really worth that massive price jump over, for instance, 20 grand or less for a 4.2, 25, 30 grand for a nice condition 5 litre? That is a very big difference in price. Is it really worth that? Well, actually, I would say there's 2 distinctly different answers to that, and it all depends on the kind of buyer that you are. I would say that for the vast majority of us, absolutely not. As a former owner, I would honestly say I would rather live with my 4.2 than this. Because what this car does, what it offers and what it's very good at, is not what I need. I don't need 540 horsepower, I don't need a balls out supercar version of the Jag, it's just not what I wanted from the car. I wanted the more comfortable GT, but with more than enough power. The 4.2 with 420 horses did that perfectly for my tastes, and for many of you watching this, who do own them, I'm sure the 5 litre feels just like that for you. This, for those of us who are that way, will never be a necessary car, because we don't look for the Jag to be a supercar. However, for those people, this is the perfect choice, because 9 times out of 10 you're not going to even find the GT, and if you do it's going to be crazy expensive. This one at least does make a little bit more sense on price. For example, yes, £55,000 for a used one does seem a lot for a decade-old car, but you can actually easily pay that for an end-of-line dynamic R5 litre with way less power and way less performance. So the price actually isn't that bad for what it is. To me, that's the kind of buyer who wants this car. That's the kind of person who should buy this car. Somebody who wants a supercar which happens to be a Jaguar, not the other way around. And that is the biggest crucial difference for me between this and other versions of the XKR. It's so much more than just the same thing with more power. It couldn't be more different from the truth. And in fact, the only downside per se in my experience of driving this was actually a fairly obvious one. And that is that because it's so much more focused on performance, with less and less interest in the GT Tourer side of things, the ride is notably firmer than the 5 litre or the 4.2 or the base models. It is a stiffer, firmer car in terms of its ride, so it bounces over potholes far more, it judders over those kind of imperfections in the road, because it is more of, a track day special-esque approach. For some owners, for some buyers, especially older ones, you will not like that. And I would say that generally speaking, this kind of feels a little bit more like a younger man's Jag. Now, those of you who know my taste know that I actually tend to prefer the older man's kind of thing. A little bit more of a relaxed approach, a little bit more of relying on the torque to waft you down country lanes and have fun at any speed. Even I, though, can love this car, which I did. It's great, and it's very addictive. But I just think that it's so specialised that it's the kind of car that even without driving one, you probably already know if it's the kind of thing you're going to like. Because if everything I described sounds like something you would be interested in, then it fully lives up to that, and you will adore it. If, on the other hand, you already like the 5 litre, or you already like the 4.2, then this is absolutely not an essential car for you by any stretch. It's so much more than just a power hike and a power difference. It is a very different animal. The way it carries itself, the way it's designed, the aerodynamic changes, and even the actual, as I said, air that the car gives off, the kind of road presence which this has, is so notably different to any other XK. I pass quite a few XKs on the street now that I'm driving my new car, more than when I was driving my own XK, which is annoying, but they just don't have the same effect. When you see this on the road, it's a special occasion. It's a unicorn car. When you see other XKs, they simply don't have that same double take effect on you, especially if you were a former owner. This is a car that you look twice at. Normal XKs, you might not. And to me, that basically sums up my thoughts. This review doesn't really need to delve into, potential issues and reliability and fuel economy, because chances are you've already watched my other XK reviews, and a lot of that kind of stuff will be carried over. This, as I said, is 100% the kind of Jag for somebody who likes the XK, but just wants it turned up to 11 in every way. It manages to be so different, as I've alluded to the models below it, that it almost feels like this should have a different name. To call it an XKR is almost a disservice to how much more special this car actually feels. And I think that's pretty impressive. And at this point in my experience of driving these Jags and owning them, the one which I would actually be the most keen to try out next is actually this car's predecessor, the 4.2 generation XKR-S, the one which essentially looks like mine but has the extra carbon chin splitter and the body kit, the side skirts and the kind of unique wheels. And no difference in power, no real difference in performance, but it's lowered, stiffered, and a little bit more focused on cornering, kind of like what you'd expect from if ProDrive retuned the car. I would be very keen to experience that vehicle. This one, though, is very special. It's definitely a different breed of big cat, that's for sure, as I alluded to in the thumbnail. So for those of you who get the chance to drive one, of course, take that opportunity. If you own one of these, if you've had the chance to drive this and other lower variants, tell me your thoughts. Do you agree or disagree? And of course, if you are a fan of XKs or XKR content and want more of it, there's quite a lot here on the channel, from my own to the ones that I've reviewed and everything in between. But that's it for this particular review. Of course, I will see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.